Timmins isn't called the city with a heart of gold for nothing. Mining that precious metal in many ways built the northeastern Ontario town. And tonight, right after this program, TVO airs the world broadcast premiere of Northern Gold. It's a two-part documentary series which tells that story. Catie Lamer is the writer, producer, and director. She made this documentary series with Alibi Entertainment, and she joins us now for more. So nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you for being here. We're actually going to talk all about this doc, but should we let people have a little sense about how it looks and sounds?
Yes, please.
Why don't we do that? Mr. Director, if you would, a clip, please.
How has gold shaped Northern Ontario?
There were 200 and 300 men a day showing up into the camps.
Find out how Timmins was built by a gold rush.
All of a sudden, grocers and druggists, all those little businesses started.
Each of the neighborhoods had their own churches and their own senses of identity.
The thing with opportunity is that the window opens at a certain time and then closes. So it kind of opened then for me.
And its uncertain future as the mines close.
Mining is not a sustainable industry.
And then I seen my first paycheck, and it just got better every year, so I just kept doing it.
Every time you take a shovelful of ore out, the mine is dying.
When a mine shuts down, it also causes an enormous amount of economic catastrophe.
If my mine would close, there's jobs everywhere I find. There's camp jobs all over the place also if you can't get a job in Timmins.
But on balance, I think the experience has been positive.
Northern Gold, a TVO original on TVO.
Congratulations on getting it done. I liked it so much. But let's start about, where are you from?
I am from roundabout. Was born in Bermuda, and then I moved to Canada when I was a kid with my family.
Canada being where?
Toronto.
You have nothing to do with Timmins, do you?
I do not.
How did you end up making a documentary about a place that's a heck of a long way away from here?
Well, it's a good question. I became interested in it with TVO. We knew that TVO was interested in doing something around gold, exploring that topic. And when Alibi Entertainment and I began looking into it, we discovered that there was a wealth of sort of hidden histories in Ontario and in Northern Ontario specifically. And what I was so blown away by is just how little I knew about it. I went to school in Ontario. I didn't really learn about the North all that much, and I really didn't learn about the gold industry. And it's something that as soon as I started sort of uncovering it, I wanted to just dig deeper and deeper and deeper.
That's what I appreciated about it so much. I mean, I'm twice, if not three times your age, and I knew so little about all of this as well. You got to spend a lot of time in Timmins, obviously, in the making of this series. What were your impressions of the place?
Another good question. Immediately I noticed just the sort of geographical difference. It does look quite different. The first time I went was in January, so it was just covered in snow, snowmobiles everywhere. And then, it's a much smaller place, and there's a difference between the Northern Ontario and Southern Ontario, and
that seems so obvious to say, but maybe it does need to be said.
I think it does need to be said, and I think it's something that people actually don't really know too much about, and I think Northerners, as they call themselves, consider themselves quite different than Southern Ontario. And there's a different sort of temperament, a different way of being. I really noticed right away just the kindness that people greet you with, the familiarity, things like that.
What did you find up there in terms of, let's say, remnants of a colonial attitude?
I think David Robinson says it in the documentary.
This is the Laurentian professor.
It is, and he sort of refers to Northern Ontario as once being a colony within a colony, and I think that still holds true today in some ways. I think that some Northern Ontarios view themselves as being sort of left out of the rest of Southern Ontario, and I think the thing is a lot of economic profit is sprung from Northern Ontario, but it gets funneled back into Southern Ontario, so I think people feel left out of that system. I think they don't reap the rewards that they sow.
There are some absolutely gorgeous scenes in this picture. I don't know where you got all this old footage, but it's, well, let's start there. Tell me about this, because how old is this footage? Some of it, it looks 100 years old or 75 years old, something like that.
Some of it is very old. Obviously the photographs are older, but it dates back to the early years of Timmins, and it all comes from the Timmins Museum, and that is Karen Bachman, who's interviewed in the film and who also played our large role behind the scenes. She was influential in getting us all of the tape it came on, so we digitized it all. The deal was we digitized it, we could use it, and then send them back the digitized version so they could use it for the future. And it was just a wealth of archive archive, and me and my editor just sifted through it and picked it out, and it was like a dream for a filmmaker to have that.
It does paint such a stark picture of the way things were way back when.
Yeah.
When there's some descriptions about how people worked in the mines 75 years ago that are really, that was a very, very, very hard life.
Yeah.
This is before unions, this is before technology, this is as bare bones as it gets, eh? How hard a life was that?
It was incredibly hard, and I think it's a testament to the strength of the people who have fought in unions. We've come so far. But it was an incredibly hard life. You know, the average lifespan, again, I think, I don't want to spoil too much, but it's mentioned in the documentary, the average lifespan of a mine worker at the very beginning was very short. So I think, you know, the conditions were really quite brutal. At the bottom of the mine, there were people flooding in to work in Northern Ontario from all over, like, different parts of the world. And so...
people need to understand that. This was a gold rush. Almost unlike anything else in North America.
It was huge.
It was massive.
Huge. Yeah, it was a massive gold rush. People were coming from all parts of Europe specifically to work in the gold mines. They weren't coming to Toronto. They were going to Northern Ontario. And I think that's another thing that people don't know, that multiculturalism really sprung from the north and then kind of migrated back down into the south. But that's where people were going.
Well, they loved immigrants there, didn't they?
They did.
For a bunch of reasons.
For a bunch of reasons.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you know, I think, and again, we explored in the documentary, but people felt that immigrants were potentially, you know, more expendable. And I think that's something that that initially in the early days mines exploited. You know, I think we say it in the documentary, but it was an expendable industry at that time.
If the immigrant died on the job, who cared?
There's people waiting at the gates to be picked up and to go back into the bottom of the mine.
And if they got in trouble even more, they could kick you out of the country, and again, who cares?
Yeah, and there were deportations.
How did you decide who you were going to talk to for this documentary?
Another good question. You know, I really wanted to have a cross-section of Timmins today and also people who could speak about Timmins in the past. So we had sort of a cross-section of Timmins historians. We had David Robinson, who's an economist, who really spoke to that. Charlie Angus, who's an MP. He has a wealth of knowledge about the North. And then as well, we wanted Timmins residents who could speak about what Timmins is like today. And we really wanted as a diverse group of people as possible. And that's something that we really focused on.
In a way, the next question is a bit terrible. It's like asking a parent who your favorite child is. But did you have a favorite interviewee?
Oh, I don't want to say that. I mean,
Well,
I really enjoyed working with everybody, and I think what I liked so much about it is that everybody brought a unique perspective, and I think that their voices added so much to the documentary. And if you took one person away, it wouldn't have been as well-rounded and as full. So I think, you know, everybody we interviewed is in the documentary.
I don't want to spoil, I don't want to give away too much here, but I do need to ask you about one moment, which is absolutely heartbreaking, where a young fella is sort of asked, where do you want to be in life? And his answer is, anywhere but here. Now, if you live in Timmins today and you watch this and you see that, what do you think when he said that?
You know, I think there's a couple ways to think about it. I think that most young people, when they're at that point in their lives, often have the sense that they want to be anywhere else but where they are. They want to go out and explore the world. They want to jumpstart their own life. I do think that Timmins can also be a hard place to grow up in some ways. I think that...
well, we should add, I mean, he's an African-Canadian fellow.
He is,
High school student, I guess?
High school student,
okay. So he doesn't look like very many other people in that city to begin with.
No, he doesn't. I think that there can be difficulty around that, and I think that although he and his family have definitely made Timmins their home, and they have a fantastic life there, and it's rich with different people and friends and community, so I think that should be stressed. But I think that there are challenges in the North, and I think, you know, it's something that that's also what I wanted to emphasize, though, as well, is that multiculturalism and immigration is still happening in the North, and it's something that I wanted to explore, and those current modern-day challenges as well that new immigrants face. Did
you find, in your time there, more hopefulness or hopelessness? Another good question. You know, I think more hopefulness. And
really?
Yeah, I do. I think so. I think
despite the changing landscape and the mining industry, I think that the sort of fortitude and resilience of the people in Timmins and in Northern Ontario in general is just still so alive, still so strong, and they're carrying that sort of that spirit forward into maybe an unknown future. But I think that despite the challenges, there's hope.
Let's finish up on this. You know, people will take from this what they will take from this, but if you had your druthers, what do you hope they take away from the documentary series after watching it?
Oh, another good question. You're good at this.
It's not my first rodeo.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I think that I want people to learn something, to uncover something that they didn't know before, to want to explore Canada in a different way, and to really venture out on their own, and to research, to learn, and to explore Ontario, Canada, and become familiar with things that they don't know already about their own country. There's so much to know.
Well, for this viewer, mission accomplished.
Thank you very much.
I've been there a number of times, but I see it in a whole different way now, and I actually look forward to going back and seeing it through your eyes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's Catie Lamer. She is the writer, director, and producer of Northern Gold, and did it through Alibi Entertainment, and of course, it's going to be on right after this program. Thanks so much, Catie.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.